If your own parents ever sat across from you and tried to turn your success into their property, this story is your justice. My father slid a folder across my table and told me to sign my penthouse over to my sister for family, and then threatened court when I refused. Before we dive in, hit like, type justice in the comments, and tell me what time it is and where in the world you're watching from right now. I didn't recognize my parents when they walked into my penthouse that afternoon. They looked like visitors, not family. Not people who helped raise me. Strangers with familiar faces and an agenda so sharp it could cut glass. My father set his leather briefcase on my dining table like he owned the place. Like the 23rd floor skyline view belonged to him. My mother stood by the windows, arms folded, pretending to admire the city, but her eyes were too restless for admiration. My sister sat between them, hands folded over her stomach, her expression carefully curated innocence, the kind she always used whenever she wanted something handed to her, without lifting a finger. It was quiet for a moment. That kind of thick, waiting quiet when everyone knows a bomb is about to drop. But no one wants to say who's holding the detonator. My father broke the silence first. "We're here for something important," he said, his voice flat, measured, rehearsed, like this wasn't a conversation but a presentation. A decision already made, now being delivered. "We hope you'll be cooperative. We hope you'll be cooperative." Cooperative. That was his word of choice whenever he wanted obedience disguised as teamwork. I sat down across from him slowly. "What's going on?" My sister sighed loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Can we please not make this difficult?" I ignored her and kept my eyes on my father. He reached into his briefcase, pulled out a thick manila folder, and slid it across the table toward me. The scrape of cardboard on wood felt louder than it should have. "Open it," he said. I didn't. Instead, I looked at my mother. She was still staring out the window, but now her jaw was tight, her hands clasped too tightly in front of her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. My stomach dropped. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Finally, I flipped open the folder. The first page hit me like a punch. Quitclaim deed. Prepared. Dated. Ready for signatures. My signature. My name was already typed into the grantor section. My sister's name was typed into the grantee line. For a moment, the words didn't register. It felt surreal, like reading a script from someone else's nightmare. Dad leaned back in his chair. "We need you to transfer ownership of the penthouse." I blinked. "You're joking." "No," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Your sister needs it." I looked at her. She placed a gentle hand on her stomach, eyes glossy, the picture of manufactured fragility. "We're starting a family," she whispered. "This space is perfect. It's meant to be filled with love, not," she waved vaguely at the minimalist decor, "workaholic energy." My mother finally turned around. "Sweetheart, 3 bedrooms for 1 person? It's selfish." She softened her tone, weaponizing warmth. "You've always been the responsible one. You can buy another place. A smaller one. Something practical." I stared at them like they were speaking a language I'd never heard. "You want me to just give her my home?" Dad didn't blink. "It's the best choice for the family." There it was. The one word that silenced logic, crushed boundaries, and excused exploitation in millions of families. Family. My sister gave a weak sniffle. "This isn't about taking from you. This is about giving my children a chance. A good start. Don't you want that?" I laughed because the alternative was screaming. "You want me to hand over the penthouse I spent 10 years saving for?" My father's mouth twitched with irritation. "We're not asking. We're telling you what needs to be done." I closed the folder, pushed it back toward him. "No." He didn't reach for it. He didn't move at all. "You didn't even think about it." "I don't need to think about it." My sister's voice sharpened. "You're being dramatic." My mother stepped closer. Her perfume thick and familiar. Too sweet for the moment. "We thought you'd understand." that you'd want to help. I've helped all my life, I said. I've helped when she got the BMW at 16, and I got a bus pass. I've helped when she got the college fund, and I got, you'll figure it out. I've helped when she got vacations, and I got double shifts. I looked at each of them. I helped when no one helped me. Dad's eyes narrowed. Your tone is unacceptable. My boundary is non-negotiable. Silence fell again, this time colder. Dad stood up abruptly. You have 1 week. Think carefully about what your refusal says about your loyalty to this family. He started packing his briefcase. My sister grabbed her purse dramatically. My mother paused by the door just long enough to whisper, You're going to regret this. The three of them left my penthouse like a boardroom adjourned. I stood alone in the hallway, staring at the closed door. Then I exhaled slow, shaky, angry. I thought that was the end of it. But 3 days later, a certified envelope arrived at my door. Thick paper, legal letterhead, cold language, threats hidden in professionalism. My hands trembled as I slid the document out and read the first sentence. They weren't asking anymore. They were suing. My family had declared war on me, and they expected me to lose without fighting back. But what they didn't know was simple. I kept receipts, every single one, and I was done playing the villain in their story. If you're still with me, hit like and type justice in the comments so I know you're locked in, because part 2 is where the truth starts getting sharp. The certified letter sat on my kitchen island like a loaded weapon. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at it, the heavy envelope pressed with the name of a law firm I had never heard of, embossed in navy blue ink. Designed to intimidate. And it worked. My fingers were trembling before I even tore the flap open. I slid the papers out slowly, carefully, like they might explode. The first line punched the air out of my lungs. Notice of intent to file complaint. The allegations were printed in neat little paragraphs, emotionless but vicious. They claimed my parents had equitable interest in my penthouse, that there was an oral family trust agreement, that I had agreed verbally, apparently to hold the property for the benefit of my sister's growing family. I read that line 3 times. It was a lie, a cold-blooded, fabricated lie dressed up in legal phrasing. My parents were weaponizing fiction against me. I dropped the papers onto the counter and sank into a chair. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. A million thoughts rushed through me, all crashing into each other. Maybe I misread something. Maybe they weren't serious. Maybe this was just another manipulation tactic, another pressure play to get me to fold. But then I read the next page. Sign and return the enclosed quitclaim deed within 48 hours to avoid legal escalation. 48 hours. They gave me 2 days to hand over everything I had worked for. 2 days to erase a decade of sacrifice. 2 days to surrender to their narrative. My phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. My sister's husband had posted a picture. A dark, moody photo of my sister sitting at their dining table with a hand on her belly and a tissue in her hand. His caption read, "Some people forget where they came from. Pray for my wife and her family during this difficult time." The comments were already piling up. "You deserve better. She needs support. Some siblings are toxic. Praying for you, family first." Aunt Linda chimed in. "Of course. It's always the ones who do well who forget the rest of us." And then someone else. "She's always been selfish." They were talking about me. They weren't even tagging me. But they didn't have to. Everyone knew. I didn't cry. I didn't even get angry yet. I just sat there, staring at my phone as if watching a slow-motion accident. People who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly had opinions. Cousins who never liked me were now emboldened. My sister's friends, people I had never met, suddenly declared me the villain. Then my voicemail chimed. I pressed play. My mother's voice, shaky and weak, perfectly rehearsed. I never thought I'd raise someone so cold, so selfish. "If you don't fix this, don't come to Christmas. Don't come to Thanksgiving. Don't come to anything ever again. We're done." The message ended. The The silence after was deafening. I stared at my reflection in the black screen of my phone. My eyes looked tired, hollow, like someone who was being dragged into a role she never auditioned for. Maybe I was the villain. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe blood did matter more than property papers and mortgage payments. Maybe family was supposed to come first, no matter what. I walked into my home office. My hands felt numb as I reached up to the shelf and pulled down the binder I kept tucked between two textbooks. The one Claire told me to keep, the one I filled with documents year after year even when I didn't know why. It thudded onto the desk, heavy and thick. I wiped my palms on my jeans, opened it, and flipped to the first page. There it was. My purchase agreement, dated. Signed. Notarized. Buyer. My name. Down payment. $84,000. Source of funds. My personal savings account, ending in 4,712. No joint ownership. No parental contribution. No family trust. No verbal agreement. Just me. I turned the page. The seller's agent had written a note in the margin during closing, handwritten, in blue ink. Buyer's parents declined to co-sign or contribute. Transaction is solo. I felt something shift in my chest, something like clarity. Something like fire. They could lie to the family. They could lie to social media. They could lie to themselves. But they could not lie to paper. I flipped to the deed. Embossed county seal. Owner of record. My name. No co-owners. No secondary interest. Just me. Next page. The wire transfer receipt. $84,000 from my account, straight to escrow, time-stamped. Irrefutable. Their oral agreement? It didn't exist because it never happened. They were counting on emotion, counting on guilt, counting on my fear of losing the family, but they didn't count on me having evidence. I closed the binder and pressed my palms against the cover, hard. This wasn't about being the villain or the hero. This was about survival. I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the city I built my life in. The skyline didn't judge me. The lights didn't demand anything of me. The world outside my penthouse was full of strangers who didn't see me as a resource or a safety net. Out there, I was just a person who worked hard and earned her place. Inside my family, I was a life raft they intended to capsize. My phone buzzed again. A text from my father this time. You want to tear the family apart over a piece of real estate? Fine. Court it is. I didn't respond. Instead, I whispered to the empty room, I'm not losing everything I built to protect people who never protected me. And then, for the first time in my life, I wasn't scared of being called cold, or selfish, or ungrateful. I was scared of what would happen if I didn't fight back. If you're still watching, type justice in the comments. Because part 3? That's when I discover exactly why they wanted the penthouse, and it's darker than anything they admitted. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the quitclaim deed, the legal threats, the social media posts labeling me selfish, the family members piling on without even hearing my side. The pressure was suffocating, a tight, invisible hand around my throat. I kept replaying their words, my father's cold command, my mother's guilt-drenched voice, my sister's fake tears. A part of me wondered if they truly believed they were right, but a louder part knew the truth. People who are drowning will pull down anyone within reach, even their own children. The next morning, I woke up to 8 missed calls, 4 from unknown numbers, 2 from my aunt, 1 from a cousin, and 1 from a number I knew too well, my father's office line. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I already knew the tone. Pressure, righteousness, ultimatums, disguised as concern. Instead, I turned off my phone, walked to my kitchen, and made coffee with hands that still weren't steady. Then my doorbell rang. My heart jumped, panic flaring. But it wasn't them. It was my building's concierge, holding a second certified envelope. He handed it to me with a polite nod, unaware that he was placing another bomb in my hands. As soon as I closed the door, I ripped it open. Another letter from the same law firm, another veiled threat, another reminder. 48 hours. They wanted me to sign away the penthouse or prepare for a public lawsuit. I sat down at the dining table where just days ago my father had slid that first folder across like a hitman delivering instructions. The morning sunlight hit the documents, making the black ink glow with an ugly finality. They were serious, they were organized, they were willing to drag me through court, and they were certain they'd win because they thought I'd crumble under shame before the first filing even went through. But something new flickered inside me. Not fear, not guilt, rage. Controlled, cold rage, the kind that doesn't explode, but calculates. They thought I'd break because I was alone, but I wasn't alone. I had something they didn't expect. I had truth. I had documentation. I had a decade of evidence. And I had one person who would never play favorites. Paper. I pulled the binder closer again. The weight of it grounded me. Page after page supported what I already knew but needed to see in black and white. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't selfish. I wasn't cruel. I was the only one in this family who didn't treat people like resources. I took a deep breath and kept flipping. Mortgage statements, property tax receipts, HOA statements, my signature on every line. Them? Nowhere. I turned the page again. And that's when I saw it, something I hadn't looked at in months, because it hadn't mattered until now. The homeowner's insurance policy. It listed replacement value, market value, and then the current estimated appraisal. My eyes widened. My penthouse had appreciated by nearly $300,000 since I bought it. I whispered the number aloud, just to hear it. 300,000. Suddenly, the urgency made sense. The pressure made sense. The family trust lie made sense. My family wasn't after the penthouse for my sister's fresh start. They were after equity, my equity. A lump formed in my throat as it clicked into place. They were drowning financially. They saw me as a solution, a living asset, not a daughter. My emotions spiraled, hurt, betrayal, clarity. But before I could even make sense of it, my phone buzzed on the counter. I hadn't turned it completely off. It had just been silenced. A text preview flashed across the lock screen. From Dad. You want to behave like an outsider? Fine. But remember, outsiders don't get protected. Protected. He meant emotionally, socially, financially, every form of leverage they believed they controlled. They thought separation would scare me into compliance. Instead, it made me more certain. I reopened the binder and flipped to the back section, the one I barely touched since moving in. It contained everything from the first year. Insurance quotes, HOA disclosures, appraisal evaluations, inspection reports. Most people never keep these, but Claire, my first boss, had drilled into me. Paper is power. Then I saw it, a line in the appraisal summary, one I had forgotten. This unit is exempt from rent control and classified as luxury ownership property, meaning if someone got their hands on it, they could flip it for cash, faster than a family secret spreads at a reunion. That was the motive. Not love, not babies, not stability, not family. Profit, a simple, brutal, undeniable motive. Then another piece slid into place. My sister's husband losing his job, their condo being behind on payments, my parents' strangely timed renovation last year that no one could explain, my father's sudden insistence on meeting face to face after years of emotional distance. They weren't trying to help her, they were trying to save themselves from financial collapse, and they had decided I would be the sacrifice. For a moment, I felt the old version of myself, the obedient daughter, the peacekeeper, slip into my thoughts. Maybe you can just downsize. Maybe it's not worth losing the family over a property. But the new version of me, the one who built everything with her own hands, shut that down. I whispered to myself, my success is not a family bailout plan. Then I did something completely out of character. I called someone, not a friend, not a cousin, not anyone I shared blood with. I called a lawyer. It rang twice before a calm, seasoned female voice answered. Law Office of Diane Cho. I swallowed. Hi. I need help. My family is trying to claim ownership of my property. There was a pause. Then she said, "Tell me everything." I talked for 20 minutes straight. Every detail, every threat, every document, every subtle manipulation, every lie. When I finished, she didn't sound shocked. She sounded focused. "First," she said, "stop talking to them. All communication goes through me now. Second, bring me your binder. Third, do not under any circumstances sign anything." I exhaled shakily. "What happens next?" She didn't hesitate. "We fight, and we win." And in that moment, as I stood alone in my penthouse with a binder full of truth and a lawyer ready to go to war, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Power, the kind they never expected me to use. If you're watching this, and your family ever tried to guilt you into sacrificing what you earned, hit like so the algorithm knows you're here. And type justice in the comments, because part 4 is where things get ruthless. I stood in front of the mirror before leaving for Diane's office, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something different in my reflection. Something steadier, something colder, something my parents had never expected to see from me. Resolve, not anger, not fear. Resolve. The kind that doesn't raise its voice. The kind that signs papers. The kind that wins. The binder felt heavier than usual as I carried it down to the car. It wasn't just paper anymore. It was armor. Evidence. A decade of my life. Neatly catalogued, organized, and ready to be weaponized if needed. I remembered Claire's words from years ago. Track every dollar like it's evidence. One day, you'll need it. I'd thought she was being dramatic. Now it felt prophetic. Diane's office was downtown. A glass tower with chrome accents, and a lobby that smelled like old money and fresh lawsuits. When I stepped inside, the receptionist recognized my name instantly. "Miss Cho is expecting you," she said, standing to escort me to a conference room. Diane entered a minute later, mid-40s. Sharp suit. Expression carved from discipline. She shook my hand with a grip that told me she didn't waste time. "Let's get started." I placed the binder on the table. She opened it like a surgeon preparing for an operation. Page by page, she flipped through purchase agreements, mortgage statements, tax receipts, appraisal documents. She didn't rush. She didn't talk. She analyzed. When she finally looked up, her expression hadn't softened, it had sharpened. "Is why you're going to win." I hadn't realized how much tension I was holding until that moment. My shoulders dropped. My lungs expanded. My heartbeat slowed. "Let me walk you through what's happening," she continued. She pulled out a legal pad and drew 3 intersecting circles. Circle 1. Your parents' financial instability. Circle 2. Your sister's debt and her husband's unemployment. Circle 3. Your penthouse's current equity. She pointed at the overlapping center. That overlap is motive. Money. Desperation. Pressure. I swallowed. So they never believed they had a legal claim. Diane smiled without humor. "No, this was never about legality. This was about intimidation. They hoped fear of a lawsuit would push you to surrender the deed." She flipped to the letter they sent me. "This," she said, tapping it, "is a bluff wrapped in legal stationery. They claim an oral family trust agreement. They claim equitable interest. Yet for an equitable claim to stand, they must prove contribution, financial or contractual." She pushed the mortgage statements toward me. "They contributed nothing. They signed nothing. They paid nothing. There is no trust, no agreement, no paperwork. They are relying entirely on emotional leverage." Then she leaned forward. "Tell me, honestly, did they expect you to fold?" "Yes," I whispered, because that was the truth. I'd been folding since childhood. I'd been accommodating, shrinking, pleasing, apologizing, avoiding conflict, carrying burdens that weren't mine. And they counted on the version of me they built, not the version I became. Diane tapped her pen against the table. Well, I felt a strange sense of vindication bloom in my chest. Not joyful, not triumphant, just steady, grounded. We'll begin with a declaratory judgment, she said. It's a simple motion asking the court to declare you the sole owner of the penthouse. Once the court grants it, and they will, your parents legally lose any claim, fictional or otherwise. And if they sue anyway? I asked. Diane didn't blink. Then we counterclaim for abuse of process and file for legal fees. Legal fees, meaning they'd pay for the fight they started. She pushed a new document toward me. This is a cease and desist letter. It formally warns them that any further attempts to claim ownership or harass you will result in immediate legal action. My throat tightened as I read the opening paragraph. It was clinical, precise, unemotional, the exact opposite of their threats. It didn't beg. It didn't bargain. It stated facts. Our client is the sole legal owner of the property in question. Any continued misrepresentation of ownership, threats of litigation, or defamatory statements will result in counter-litigation. My parents had come at me with guilt. I was coming back with law. But then a thought struck me. What about the family? The group chat? The social media posts? Everyone thinks I'm betraying them. Diane nodded. Then it's time to change the narrative. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a small device. This is a digital recorder. You're going to record a factual statement summarizing the purchase history of the penthouse, your payments, and the lack of contribution from your parents. I hesitated. Like, a video? Yes, she said. Not for social media unless you need it, but because online attacks escalate quickly. If your family continues slandering you publicly, you will have a time-stamped record of the truth. Documentation protects you from emotional ambush. I swallowed. And if they stop, then the recording stays private. She paused. But emotionally manipulative families rarely stop on their own. I nodded, because she was right. Then Diane closed the binder gently. Your job now is simple. Do nothing, say nothing, respond to nothing. All communication goes through me. It was surreal, a lifetime of defending myself, justifying myself, explaining myself, and now I was being told to stop. Your silence, Diane added, is not weakness, it is strategy. That line hit me deeper than I expected. I left her office with the binder under my arm and a new strength in my chest. When I stepped outside, the air felt different, cooler, clearer, like the city itself had shifted subtly in my favor. But the moment I unlocked my phone, reality snapped back hard. A new message in the family group chat. From my sister, some of us are drowning and she's watching from her penthouse throne. Then Aunt Linda again. Shameful. Truly shameful. Then my mother. I raised a stranger. And finally my father. We gave you life. You owe us more than paperwork. My fingers hovered over the screen. I wanted to respond. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to scream. You didn't build this. I did. But Diane's words echoed in my head. Do nothing. Say nothing. Respond to nothing. I locked my phone and set it face down. Silence wasn't passivity. Silence was preparation. Later that night, my cousin called. The only one who hadn't picked a side yet. Her voice was low, cautious. I heard what's happening. Are you okay? I hesitated. I don't know. She exhaled. Do you want to know what's really going on? And that was the moment everything changed, because what she told me next explained every lie, every threat, every manipulation, every desperate move my family made. And it was darker and more calculated than I ever imagined. If you're still here, hit like and type justice in the comments, so part 5 hits harder in the algorithm. My cousin didn't speak right away. I heard her inhale sharply on the other end, like she was weighing whether the truth was worth the fallout. Listen, she said finally, voice low and careful. I'm only telling you this because no one else will, and you deserve to know what you're really up against. I braced myself. What's going on? There was a pause. Then, your sister and her husband are in deep financial trouble. My stomach tightened, not because it was surprising, but because the puzzle pieces were already clicking into place in my mind. I'd seen the cracks, the extravagant vacations, the expensive baby announcements, the constant upgrading of furniture, the BMW they leased last spring. Everything shiny, everything loud, everything curated for Instagram. But behind the filters? I knew debt when I saw it. How deep? I asked. My cousin sighed. 3 months behind on their condo mortgage. A cold ripple ran through me. 3 months, and that's not all, she added. He lost his job 8 months ago. He didn't tell anyone except your parents. They're living off credit cards, and what little he gets from freelance contracts. My grip tightened on the phone. So they're drowning. They're not just drowning, she said quietly. They're sinking. Fast. I paced across my living room, heartbeat picking up. My parents knew. Yes, she said. And when your sister's condo spiraled into delinquency, guess who stepped in? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My parents refinanced their house, I whispered. Didn't they? My cousin exhaled shakily, as if relieved I already knew. Yes. 11 months ago. They took a second mortgage to help her avoid foreclosure. $125,000. That was the amount listed on the lien search I'd found earlier. And now, she added, they can't afford the payments either. I felt the world tilt slightly, like gravity had shifted. It wasn't just guilt. It wasn't just emotional manipulation. It wasn't just favoritism. This was survival economics. Let me guess, I said bitterly. The equity in my penthouse solves all their problems at once. Silence. Then, yes, $68,000 in my sister's debts, $125,000 in my parents' second mortgage, $370,000 in equity from my penthouse. I was a perfect reset button, a clean slate dressed as a daughter. My cousin swallowed audibly. They think you're stable, the one who made it. They think you'll bounce back if you lose the penthouse. But if your parents lose their house or your sister loses hers, they think it destroys the whole family. Except me, I muttered. Another silence. They don't see you as breakable. They see you as the one who always handles things. Of course, the fixer, the reliable one, the responsible one. When something in the family needed saving, I saved it. Not because they helped me, not because they earned my loyalty, but because I was conditioned to believe that saving them was the same as loving them. My cousin hesitated before asking, Do you hate me for telling you this? No, I said. I hate that you were the only one who did. We hung up. And I stood in the center of my penthouse, my home, processing the full magnitude of it. They didn't want me to downsize for family harmony. They didn't want me to share because I had extra space. They didn't want fairness, balance, or compromise. They wanted my asset, my security, my sacrifice, my decade of work. They wanted me to clean up debts I didn't create. Debts I didn't know about. Debts caused by their bad decisions, denial, and avoidance. And they expected me to do it quietly, gratefully, lovingly, because in their minds, that's what the oldest daughter is for. But as I stood there, heartbeat pounding, I felt something come into focus inside me. Not blame, not pity, not guilt, clarity. My family had 2 choices: fix their own mistakes, use me, and they chose option 2. I picked up the binder and flipped to the mortgage ledger, the one I had carefully printed every year. 36 payments over 3 years. Each one pulled from my checking account. Each one mine. Principal, interest, taxes, insurance. Total paid so far, $157,000. Parents' contribution, 0. Sister contribution, 0. Oral agreement, 0. It was all me. And now they wanted to rewrite history because they needed a financial miracle. They weren't asking for my help, they were demanding my life. I sat down and forced myself to breathe. Deep, slow, controlled. Then my phone buzzed again. A new text from my father. Final reminder. You have 24 hours left. If you don't sign the deed, we file tomorrow morning. The audacity, the entitlement, the total lack of shame. I didn't reply. I didn't panic. Instead, I calmly opened Diane's email. She'd already sent me drafts. Cease and desist letter, declaratory judgment petition, supporting affidavit template, counterclaim outline. Attached at the bottom was her note. We move when you say move. My parents thought I would fold like I always did, but they had forgotten something critical. People who build their own lives do not hand them over. Not to guilt, not to pressure, not to blood. I clicked print. The documents slid out of my printer one by one, smooth, crisp, official. This time, the paperwork was mine, not theirs, not their narrative, not their lies, mine. Then I did something I never expected to do in my life. I recorded a video. I positioned my camera, straightened my shoulders, looked directly into the lens, and in a calm, steady voice, I said, "My name is redacted. This is a time-stamped record of the truth behind my property ownership, my family's attempted claim, and the real financial motive behind their threats." Then I showed every document, every signature, every payment, every receipt. When I finished, I saved the file, uploaded it to cloud storage, encrypted it, backed it up twice. It wasn't for revenge. It was insurance, because if they dragged my name publicly, I would drag the truth back. No yelling, no tears, just facts. Facts they could not twist, facts they could not bury, facts they could not outmanipulate. When I was done, I turned off the camera and felt a shift deep in my chest, a quiet roar rising from a place I didn't know existed. Not fear, not guilt, power, the kind you earn, the kind you document, the kind you defend. And when the clock hit midnight, I whispered to myself, they wanted a fight, they're about to get one. If this hit you, type justice in the comments so part 6 gets pushed to the right audience, because next, my family walks straight into a legal trap they didn't even know I set. The morning of the deadline, I woke up before sunrise. Not because I was anxious, though there was tension in my body, but because something inside me had shifted. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing, planning, moving deliberately in a way that felt unfamiliar and powerful. It was the first morning in weeks where I wasn't the one waiting for something to happen. I was the one making it happen. I showered, dressed, tied my hair back, and made coffee with absurd calm. Then I took the neatly printed packet of legal documents from my desk and slid them into a folder with a crisp snap. Declaratory judgment petition. Cease and desist. Affidavit. Evidence packet. Counterclaim outline. My narrative. My proof. My power. At 9 a.m. Sharp. I walked into Diane's office. She was already standing, jacket on, keys in hand. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. "Let's finish this." We drove together to the county courthouse, the city morning still waking up around us. Cars honked lazily. People rushed into office buildings. Vendors pushed carts to the corners where they'd sell breakfast burritos. Everything looked ordinary, but in the back seat of Diane's car, sitting beside the documents that would officially dismantle my family's lies, my life was splitting into two eras, before this moment and after. Inside the courthouse, the line at the civil filing window was short. Diane approached with confidence that turned heads. She passed the clerk the documents, and the clerk stamped each page with a heavy thunk that echoed through my chest. Filed, filed, filed. The clerk slid a copy of the stamped documents back toward us. "These will be processed within 24 hours, she said. "Notice will be sent to all parties," meaning my parents, my sister, their lawyer. They were about to discover the fight they thought they controlled was now out of their hands. We stepped outside into the morning sun. Diane handed me the stamped packet. "This," she said, tapping the cover, is the difference between fear and power. My phone buzzed almost instantly, as if the universe itself wanted to announce the next move. A group chat notification, the one I had muted. 32 members. Family, extended family, spouses, cousins. People who didn't even know my birthday. I opened it. My sister's message sat at the top. If she doesn't sign today, our attorney files tomorrow. We can't let her destroy our family. And right below that, my father. She had her chance. We gave her the opportunity to do the right thing. Opportunity. As if asking me to surrender my home was charity. Then my mother chimed in. Pray she makes the right decision before the courts get involved. I let out a breath that was half laugh, half disbelief. They genuinely believed they still had the upper hand, even though they didn't know the filings had already been entered, time-stamped, and sealed. And then came the plot twist I didn't expect. The next message wasn't from my parents. It was from the family lawyer. He wrote, "Urgent. I need to speak with all parties. There is new information." I almost smiled. The timing was exquisite. He must have received the electronic notice of my declaratory judgment filing the exact moment the courthouse digitized the case. My parents wouldn't understand the legal language. My sister wouldn't, either, but the lawyer did, and he knew exactly what it meant. It meant I wasn't bluffing, I wasn't folding, I wasn't intimidated. I was legally asserting my ownership, and doing it in a way that shut down their entire strategy. A few seconds later, my father texted me separately. What did you do? 4 words. Sharp. Clipped. Panic disguised as control. I typed back a single sentence. You'll see when your attorney calls. I didn't wait for his response. Instead, I walked out of the courthouse feeling taller than I had in months. The sun seemed brighter. The air felt lighter. Every step I took echoed with certainty. Diane walked beside me, her posture steady, her voice calm. You're doing the right thing, she said. I know, I replied. And I meant it, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't making a choice out of fear or guilt. I was making a choice out of truth. We parted ways in the parking lot. I drove straight home, placed the stamped papers on my dining table, the same table where my father had slid that fraudulent deed across, and stared at them. Then my phone rang again, this time, not a group chat, not a cousin, not social media. Unknown caller, local area code. I answered. Hello? A man cleared his throat. This is Robert Klein, attorney for your parents and sister. I leaned back in my chair. Yes, I'm aware. He hesitated. I could almost hear him choosing his words carefully. We received notice of your filing with the court this morning. Good, I replied. Then you know where we stand. Another pause. Miss Name, I think there's been some misunderstanding. I almost laughed. No, I said. There hasn't. We'd like to propose a meeting, he continued quickly. Today, if possible, to discuss a resolution outside of litigation. Of course they wanted a meeting. Of course they wanted to resolve things now. Because the declaratory judgment petition changed everything. Their bluff had collapsed, their false narrative had been legally challenged, and their lawyer knew their case had no foundation. I'll consider it, I said. Your parents are distraught, he added, as if emotional manipulation would work better coming from an attorney. That's unfortunate, I replied. He swallowed. I understand your frustration. No, he didn't, but he understood liability. He understood losing. He understood costs. Please confirm if you're available at 4 p.m. today, he said. I paused, then said, have Diane call you, and I hung up. I didn't owe him or them anything more. 20 minutes later, Diane texted, meeting confirmed for 4 p.m. We'll handle this. I paced around my penthouse waiting for the next wave. And at exactly 11:43 a.m., it arrived. A text message from my mother. How could you do this to us? To your family? You're breaking our hearts. Please, please don't go through with this. We can't survive a lawsuit. Call me. The old me, the one trained to respond to emergencies that weren't mine, almost wavered. But then I remembered the certified letter, the lies, the threats, the entitlement, the way she wouldn't even look me in the eye while asking me to sacrifice everything. I didn't reply. Silence was no longer avoidance. Silence was a boundary. Then another text arrived, this time from my father. If you think a lawyer makes you strong, you're mistaken. You're still our daughter. Yes, I was their daughter, but I was no longer their victim. The clock hit 4 p.m. It was time to end this war. If you're still hooked, hit like and type justice in the comments. So part 7 is pushed to the people who need this story most. The conference room was colder than I expected. Sleek glass walls, a long mahogany table polished to a mirror-like finish, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the downtown skyline. It was the kind of room where deals were made. Companies were sold, and reputations were destroyed. It wasn't lost on me that, for my family, this room represented something very different. The collapse of an illusion. Diane and I arrived 5 minutes early. She placed her files on the table with calm precision. I sat beside her, my binder resting in front of me like a quiet weapon. For a moment, I pressed my palm against the cover. It was steady. I was steady. Then the door opened. My parents walked in first. My father's jaw was clenched, his eyes already sharp with anger or fear, though he'd never admit that. My mother followed, her expression tight, controlled, like she'd practiced for the role she wanted to play. The wounded, misunderstood parent. My sister trailed behind them, pale, puffy-eyed, looking like she had rehearsed her tears. Behind them came their attorney, Robert Klein. His expression was the most interesting, neutral, but with a flicker of something that looked an awful lot like regret. He knew what was coming. We didn't greet each other. No hugs, no awkward smiles, no small talk. My father got straight to it. I don't know what game you think you're playing, but filing court documents before speaking to us was. Diane raised a hand. Slow, calm, deadly. With respect, mister. My client is not playing anything. She is responding to a threat your legal team already initiated. Robert coughed softly into his hand, visibly uncomfortable. My father bristled. There was no threat. We were trying to resolve this privately. You sent her a notice of intent to sue, Diane said, sliding one of their own letters onto the table. That is not private resolution. That is legal aggression, my sister whispered. Dad! But he ignored her. My mother leaned forward. We're family. We shouldn't be doing this in front of strangers. Diane didn't flinch. Your daughter is my client. And she is not a stranger. She is the sole owner of the property you attempted to claim. I saw my mother's face flicker. Just for a second, surprised that someone wasn't bending to her tone. Then Robert cleared his throat. Let's start from a place of mutual understanding. Your parents believed there was. Diane slid the next document forward. No oral trust agreement exists. And even if it did, which it does not, trust law requires demonstrable contribution to the property. Please show us any proof of financial involvement. Down payments, mortgage contributions, insurance, taxes, even furniture receipts, anything. My father's jaw locked. They had nothing, absolutely nothing. Diane continued, her voice smooth and cutting. My client has provided overwhelming evidence of sole ownership. Purchase agreement, title deed, transfer records, wire receipts, mortgage statements, HOA payments, property tax filings, insurance documents. 3 years of financials, all with her name alone. She placed the binder in the center of the table. This, she said, is proof. Then she slid their letter beside it. This is fiction. My father's eyes narrowed. You're twisting this. No, Diane said with a cool smile. I'm reading it. My sister suddenly burst into tears, the loud, gasping kind she'd used her entire life when logic wasn't on her side. I'm pregnant, she cried. We just need help. Why can't you help me? Why can't you support your family? My mother rubbed her back dramatically. She's your sister. She's about to bring a child into this world. And you're sitting here with lawyers instead of helping her. I felt the familiar guilt try to rise, the old instinct, the conditioning, the pull to comfort her. To apologize. To sacrifice. Then Diane spoke, her voice steady as stone, with respect. This meeting is not about emotional manipulation. It is about property ownership and attempted fraud. My sister's crying stopped instantly like a switch flipped. She glared at Diane. How dare you? Your husband's unemployment, your delinquent mortgage, and your $68,000 in unsecured debt, Diane continued, unbothered, are irrelevant to my client's home. My sister went silent so fast the room itself felt quieter. My mother's eyes widened. You told her about. No one had to tell her, Diane said. Your financial desperation is documented in public records. Robert Klein pressed his hands together. Let's keep this civil. You attempted to seize my client's property under false pretenses, Diane replied. Civil is generous. My father leaned forward, voice icy. Our intention was never to seize anything. We only wanted what was fair. Fair? Diane echoed. Let's talk about fair. She opened the binder and read aloud. Down payment. $84,000. Paid solely from my client's savings. 3 years of mortgage payments. $157,000. Paid solely from her bank account. Purchase agreement. Buyer, my client. Deed. Owner of record, my client. Parental contribution, 0. My father's face reddened. She didn't need our help. Right, Diane said. Which is why you believe she should now rescue you. He opened his mouth to argue, but Diane wasn't finished. You refinanced your home 11 months ago. You borrowed $125,000. Your daughter, she gestured at my sister, accumulated $68,000 in debt in less than 2 years, and the equity in my client's penthouse is approximately $370,000. She folded her hands calmly. Financial desperation explains motive. My mother looked like she'd been slapped. My sister stared at the table, cheeks blotchy, eyes wide. My father stiffened. This is outrageous. You're spinning this to make us look like criminals. Diane tilted her head. Attempting to fabricate an oral trust agreement to seize someone's property under false equitable claims is not criminal? She paused. Would you like me to explain the legal definition of fraud? Silence. Thick, heavy silence. My father finally exhaled, long and shaky. What do you want? Diane slid a document across the table, her final blow. A settlement agreement. The terms were brutal in their simplicity. My parents and sister acknowledge I am the sole legal owner of the penthouse. They release all past, present, or future claims to the property. They agree to permanent non-disparagement. Any further attempt to interfere with my ownership results in immediate litigation and financial penalties. They are responsible for my attorney fees if the matter escalates again. My mother gasped. You expect us to sign this? No, Diane said calmly. We expect you to understand the consequences of not signing it. Robert leaned toward my parents, whispering urgently. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the panic forming in my father's eyes. I saw my mother shrink. I saw my sister wipe tears from her cheeks, suddenly smaller, suddenly unsure. Finally, Robert straightened. My clients will review the agreement. Diane smiled sharp, victorious, inevitable. Take your time. We can wait. It took them 6 minutes. My father signed first, his signature angry, jagged. My mother signed next, her hand shaking. My sister signed last, her tears landing on the paper. Diane gathered the documents and stood. This matter, she said, is concluded. And just like that, the war they started ended. Not with my surrender, but with their signatures. I walked out of that room with something far more powerful than property. I walked out with proof that I would never again be the family scapegoat. The fixer. The lifeline. the sacrifice. If you're still locked in, type justice in the comments, so part 8 reaches more people who need this story. When I stepped out of that glass conference room, it didn't feel triumphant. It didn't feel cinematic. It felt quiet. Too quiet. Like the kind of silence that follows an earthquake stillness, where you're not sure if the ground is done shaking or if another wave is coming. Diane walked beside me without speaking, letting me breathe, letting me process. There was no congratulations. No, you did it. She knew this wasn't a victory parade. This was the end of a war I never wanted to fight. Outside, the sun was bright, sharp, almost mocking. People rushed past, carrying coffee cups, backpacks, briefcases, living normal lives. Lives not tied up in courtrooms and betrayal. My chest tightened for a moment, not from regret, but from the weight of understanding what had truly happened. My family didn't lose a lawsuit today. They lost access, control, entitlement, the version of me they thought they still owned. My phone buzzed in my hand, 3 messages from my cousin. Are you okay? Did they sign? Should I come over? I didn't answer yet. I couldn't. My throat felt heavy, and the last thing I wanted was to explain how the people who raised me had just tried to dismantle my entire life and lost. Instead, I walked home. Every block I passed felt like a chapter closing. Every step felt like shedding something I'd carried for too long. Fear, guilt, obligation. I didn't realize how exhausting it had been to hold up a family that never held me back until I felt my body relax with each stride. When I entered my penthouse, the quiet hit me again, but this time, it wasn't suffocating. The same sunlight that lit the conference room now streamed through my floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a home built by my work, my sacrifices, my choices. I set the binder on the dining table, the battlefield turned trophy, and for a moment, I just stared at it. That binder had saved me. Years of careful documentation had saved me. Claire's advice had saved me, and I realized something else. I had saved myself. I sank onto the couch and finally took a breath deep enough to feel in my spine. But the peace didn't last long. My phone buzzed again, this time with a number I recognized but didn't want to see. My mother. I let it ring, voicemail, then a text followed immediately. I can't believe what you did to us. I exhaled through my nose, slow, controlled, tired. I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, another message. We raised you better than this. Better than what? Better than protecting myself? Better than refusing to be financially sacrificed? Better than not allowing fraud? Silence. I didn't answer. Then the one she thought would break me. If you turn your back on your family now, don't expect us to be there when you need us. My chest tightened, but not because her words stung. They used to. For years, those exact threats were enough to keep me obedient, compliant, loyal to people who were never loyal to me. But now, reading them through the lens of legal truth, her words didn't sting, they revealed. They revealed the transactional nature of our relationship. They revealed how conditional their love was. They revealed that what they feared was not losing me, it was losing access to me. I set my phone face down and closed my eyes. For a few minutes, I allowed myself to feel the grief not for them, but for the version of me who spent years chasing their approval. The version of me who would have folded at the first letter. The version of me who believed keeping the peace was the same as keeping love. That girl didn't walk into the conference room today. She didn't sign the deed. She didn't surrender. She grew up. She drew a line. She won. An hour passed before another buzz shook the silence. This time, it wasn't my mother. It was my father. His message was longer than usual. Cold, clipped, written with the precision of someone who thinks authority is the same as truth. You embarrassed us today. You forced legal action we tried to avoid. You humiliated your sister and endangered your mother's health. I hope you're satisfied. You've made your choice. Don't come to us when life teaches you how wrong you were. I didn't reply, not because I didn't have words, but because every word I could send would be wasted on someone who didn't value facts, only control. Minutes later, my sister sent her own version. I hope your penthouse keeps you warm when you're alone. There it was. Their final script, their emotional Hail Mary: anger, blame, victimhood, isolation threats. I placed my phone down gently, almost with pity, because what they didn't know was this: I wasn't alone. I had myself. I had truth. I had protection. I had people who loved me without entitlement. And something else happened that afternoon, something they weren't expecting. The group chat that had once been a firing squad began to shift. One silent cousin wrote privately, "I'm sorry. I didn't know everything. I shouldn't have judged." Another, "If you need anything, I'm here. Your parents shouldn't have done that." And another, "They told us a whole different story. I'm glad you fought back." One by one, the voices that shamed me began to unravel, not because I fought them, but because lies collapse under their own weight when truth is documented. That night, I cooked for myself simple pasta. Nothing special, but it tasted better than anything I'd eaten in days. I sat on my balcony, legs tucked under me, watching the city lights scatter like glitter across the skyline. For the first time in a long time, the world felt big. Bigger than my parents' expectations, bigger than their anger, bigger than their narrative. I wasn't the black sheep. I wasn't the villain. I wasn't the selfish daughter. I was the one who built something and refused to be punished for it. Around 10 p.m., Diane texted me, "Settlement agreement is filed. They can't touch the property anymore." I stared at the message for a long time. Then something unexpected happened. I cried. Not loud sobs, not grief, not heartbreak, relief. A release, a letting go, a quiet, private acknowledgement that I survived something that could have destroyed me, not financially, but emotionally. I wiped my face and whispered into the night air, "They'll never rewrite my story again." If you're still here, type justice in the comments, because part 9 is where the emotional truth hits. What happens when the dust settles and you realize freedom comes with its own weight? The day after the settlement, I woke up before sunrise, not because of anxiety, but because my body wasn't used to sleeping without bracing for impact. For the first time in months, I didn't wake up reaching for my phone, checking for another threat disguised as a family message. I didn't wake up calculating how badly things could go wrong, or rehearsing all the things I needed to defend myself against. I woke up neutral, and neutrality, after what I'd lived through, felt like peace. I made coffee and stood at the window, watching the city yawn awake beneath me. Cars moved like small sparks along the street. Office lights clicked on in distant towers. For years, I assumed calmness came from harmony, keeping the peace, keeping everyone happy. Making myself smaller so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. I learned the hard way that peace doesn't come from shrinking. It comes from boundaries. And boundaries, I realized, are not walls. They are doors with locks you control. By mid-morning, my cousin texted again, "Your parents aren't talking to anyone. Your sister is devastated. Everyone keeps asking what really happened." I typed back one line, "I'm done explaining," because the truth didn't need me to tour it around like a presentation anymore. The documents existed. The settlement existed. The signatures existed. Their silence was not my burden. Their shame was not my responsibility. Their disappointment was not my problem to soothe. But even as I set my phone down, I felt the tug, the old reflex, the conditioned guilt, the urge to fix things I didn't break. I recognized it immediately. This is what happens when you grow up in a family where love is conditional, where being good means being useful, and where your worth is measured by how much you sacrifice for others. Old habits don't disappear in a courtroom. They dissolve slowly, painfully, over time. Around noon, I got an email from my sister. 2 sentences. "I'm sorry for how things happened. I hope someday you'll forgive me." I stared at the screen. My first instinct was to comfort her. My second was to justify myself. My third was to say, "It wasn't me who hurt you. It was the consequences catching up, but adulthood teaches you restraint, and trauma teaches you caution." So I wrote back, "Thank you. I accept your apology. I wish you the best in your new home." Polite, firm. No loopholes for manipulation. No opening for another emotional collapse. She replied with a heart emoji, which was more emotion than she'd shown me in years. Then came the message I knew would arrive eventually, the long, winding apology from my mother. At first glance, it looked sincere. She said she didn't mean for things to get this far. She said, "My father pushed everything." She said she felt pressured. She said she never wanted to hurt me. Then, the real message started bleeding through. My favorite line, "You know families sometimes make mistakes. Please don't punish us forever for one misunderstanding." Misunderstanding? They hired a lawyer, filed papers, tried to steal my home, lied to the entire family, weaponized guilt, used pregnancy, threatened holidays, fabricated an oral trust, and expected me to fold. I could have written a novel in response. Instead, I typed, "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm protecting myself. I hope you and Dad find healing." Short, controlled, boundary-rich. Her reply came instantly. "So that's it? You're done with us?" I didn't answer. Some questions are traps disguised as conversations. Later that evening, Diane called just to check on me. She had that tone lawyers get after guiding someone through emotional warfare. Steady, grounded, almost gentler than usual. She didn't ask how I was holding up. She didn't ask about my parents. She simply said, "You handled yourself with dignity." And somehow that meant more than anything my family had said in years. I thanked her and hung up. Around 8 p.m., my cousin came over with groceries and 2 bottles of wine. She let herself in with the spare key I'd given her the week before everything exploded. When she walked in, she didn't ask what happened. She didn't dissect the fight. She didn't look at me with pity. She simply said, "I'm proud of you," and started cooking like we were roommates instead of survivors of the same family tree. We ate at the island, passing garlic bread back and forth, laughing about nothing important. It struck me how healing simple moments can be. Not dramatic apologies. Not symbolic gestures. Not emotional monologues. Just normalcy. Safety. Connection not tied to exploitation. After dinner, she asked the question no one had dared ask directly. "Do you think you'll ever talk to them again?" I didn't answer right away. I stared at my wine glass and thought about it honestly. Not reactively. Not angrily. Not bitterly. "I think," I finally said, "that I'll talk to them when doing so doesn't cost me pieces of myself." She nodded slowly. "That might be a long time." "I know," I said, "but for once, time is on my side." She stayed until midnight. And when she left, I looked around my penthouse, my home, and felt gratitude instead of fear. Gratitude not because I kept the property, but because I reclaimed myself. Around 1 a.m., I paused by the bookshelf where the binder sat. I pulled it down again not to review it, but to acknowledge it. Proof is powerful, but meaning is more powerful, and the meaning had shifted. That binder wasn't just evidence. It was a record of a life I built alone, a life I defended alone, a life I could now live on my own terms. I placed it back on the shelf and whispered to myself, "You did it." A simple phrase, but after months of chaos, it felt monumental. At 2 a.m., I finally climbed into bed, not because I was exhausted, but because I was at peace. And peace, I learned, isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of self-respect. Before I fell asleep, I opened my phone and posted one line to my private journal app. "Protecting yourself is not betrayal, it's justice." And I knew then that the story wasn't over, not because something else was coming, but because I was still evolving. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of a life where my success wasn't treated like a family emergency fund, but like what it truly was, mine. If you're still reading, type justice in the comments. More than you know. It helps this kind of story reach the people who need it. 6 months passed before I realized the storm had truly ended. Not because my parents apologized. Not because my sister reached out again. Not because the family finally understood the truth. No, what marked the end was much quieter than all of that. One random Tuesday morning, I walked into my kitchen, poured myself coffee, and realized something shocking. My chest didn't tighten. My body didn't brace. My mind didn't sprint through imaginary conversations or courtroom arguments. I wasn't waiting for the next attack or the next guilt trip or the next emergency disguised as family. I was just living. And that, after everything, felt like the real victory. The penthouse felt different now. Warmer. Not because anything changed in the furniture or the layout, but because the energy in the rooms had shifted. It no longer carried the heaviness of fear that someone was trying to take it from me. It no longer held the silent question, what if I lose this? Now it held something else. Ownership, confidence, freedom. A month after that, I received an invitation in the mail. It was from the college where I got my degree, the one I paid for myself. The one no one in my family helped with. The one I earned through double shifts and sleepless nights. They wanted me to speak to a group of first-generation students about financial independence. I laughed when I opened it. Not because it was funny, but because it felt like the universe writing a perfect punchline. The girl who once lived in a basement studio with one window was now being asked to inspire others, and for the first time in a long time, I felt proud. Not survival proud, not defensive proud, just proud. I said yes, the day of the event. I walked onto campus with a confidence that surprised even me. I stood at the podium, looked out at a room full of young adults with hope and fear in their eyes, and I told them the truth, not the pretty truth, not the sanitized truth, the real truth. That binder you think is unnecessary? I said, keep it. Track everything. Not because you expect a fight, but because you deserve protection. The world assumes people like us won't have evidence. Prove them wrong. Afterward, a student approached me and said, "My mom uses my credit." I thought it was normal, and I told her the thing I wish someone had told me years ago. Love without boundaries isn't love, it's captivity, she cried. I hugged her, and I realized something that made my chest ache with both sadness and strength. My story wasn't rare. It was just rarely spoken out loud. When I got home that evening, a package was waiting at my door. No return address. I opened it carefully, half expecting something dramatic. Instead, inside was a small box wrapped in tissue paper. A baby shower invitation sat on top, my sister's handwriting. I know things can't go back to how they were, but I want my children to know their aunt. No pressure, just an invitation. I stood frozen for a moment, processing, feeling the weight of what forgiveness meant and what it didn't mean. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. Forgiveness didn't mean letting them rewrite history. Forgiveness didn't mean lowering my boundaries. Forgiveness, I realized, was simply choosing not to carry their mistakes on my back anymore. I placed the invitation on my counter and didn't answer right away. Instead, I made dinner. I lit a candle. I read a book. I let myself exist without urgency. It wasn't until later that night, looking at the city from my balcony, that I decided I could love her from a distance. I could show up for her in ways that didn't cost me myself. I could let the next generation start with less damage than the one before. So I mailed a card the next day. Not a gift. Not a promise. Congratulations. I hope motherhood brings you peace and clarity. I'll attend if time allows. Firm, neutral, healthy. My mother found out I'd been invited, of course. Within a week, she sent another card. This one handwritten. Longer. More thoughtful. I don't expect you to forgive us yet. I know what we did was wrong. I know you deserved better. I hope that someday we can rebuild something new. Something honest. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't accountability. But it wasn't manipulation either. Not this time. It was the first step of her life where she wasn't demanding something from me. And that alone felt like a miracle, in miniature. I didn't respond immediately. Healing isn't linear, and no one gets to schedule your peace. But one evening, after staring at her card for half an hour, I sent her a text. Thank you for your message. I need time, but I appreciate your effort. That's all I said. That's all she needed to hear. That's all I was willing to give, and that was enough. Weeks turned into months. I kept working, kept growing, kept building the life I fought so hard to protect. The scholarship fund I started in Claire's honor grew quickly. Donations came from colleagues, friends, even strangers who heard my story through whispers and word of mouth. And in one of those strange full-circle moments life loves to give, my boss asked me to lead a financial mentorship program for new employees. Me, the black sheep, the girl who once collected receipts in a binder like they were survival rations. At the end of one session, a new hire said, "How did you learn so much about protecting your finances?" I smiled, really smiled, and answered honestly, "I learned the hard way. And I promised myself no one else should have to." On the anniversary of the settlement, I did something symbolic. I invited a small group of people to my penthouse, my cousin, a few close friends, and Diane, who showed up with a bottle of champagne and a grin I'd never seen on her before. We toasted to survival, but more importantly, to sovereignty. After the others left, Diane lingered on the balcony for a moment, staring at the skyline. "You know," she said, "most people never fight back. They fold. They break. They accept the narrative written for them. But you rewrote it." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, absorbing the truth in her words. After she left, I stood alone under the city lights, feeling a sense of wholeness I'd never felt before. The kind that doesn't come from winning a battle, but from becoming someone who doesn't bend to threats. Someone who doesn't crumble when guilt is weaponized. Someone who owns their story not because it's perfect, but because it's theirs. I whispered into the night, "You saved yourself," and felt the truth of it vibrate through me. And here's what I want to tell anyone still reading. Your success is not community property. Your boundaries are not betrayals. Your protection of yourself is not cruelty. And justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a signature in a quiet conference room. If this hit home, type justice in the comments. Let everyone scrolling know that you stand for your own worth. And if you've ever had to fight your family for your own life, your own money, your own peace, you're not alone, and you're not wrong. This was your sign. Protect what's yours. Protect yourself,